Cornell University in 1868 opened its doors as an institution of American higher education. From its beginning, it has sought to weave together the liberal arts of the Ivy League tradition with practical education. This is where we get our story on Cornell Cooperative Extension.
The first extension work consisted at Cornell, as an example, consisted of a few of the professors at Cornell going out and giving lectures to farmers and to people in smaller communities about subjects that related to agriculture, things that they were primarily interested in, given that this was an agricultural society at that time. In the old days, I mean, think of this. Think of the difficulty of bringing a researcher who has a PhD together with an ordinary farmer who might have had a grade school education. And how in the world are you going to bring those people together to have them work together on a common problem or issue? What Extension did in the early days was hired people as Extension agents who were very skilled at being able to do that, so that people could learn from each other. Because ordinary farmers had a lot of knowledge that they learned from their life experience and from their work as a farmer. And researchers at universities had scientific knowledge and other things that could be brought together. But the thing is that both of those kinds of knowledge by themselves are not enough. So they have to be brought together, woven together. That's what an extension educator does. They try to build relationships, partnerships, where people can learn and teach from each other's own knowledge and experience.
The logic of extension was sound, tested information. So when a feed was being recommended, it wasn't because some proprietor advertised it, but because it had been thoroughly tested year after year at Cornell University and perhaps at other universities as well. And a particular practice would carry the term Cornell recommends. Cornell recommends a certain blend of nutrients for certain animals. Cornell recommends a certain kind of fertilizer for certain soils under certain conditions. And this phrase had tremendous significance because people would not be misled, presumably, by any practice that carried the phrase Cornell recommends.
Ezra Cornell had a vision to found a university that would combine liberal education with practical education. And both he and Andrew Dixon White worked very hard to establish this goal in the New York State Senate. At this point, the federal government had passed the Morrill Land Grant. This was passed in 1862 and signed by Abraham Lincoln, who was president, of course, at the time. And the two strands come together to lead to the founding of Cornell University as New York State's land grant institution. The Morrill Land Grant provided land, federal land, to be sold to fund education. Ezra Cornell owned the land on which Cornell University was built. That wasn't part of the Morrill Land Grant. But through the funds from the land grant and from Cornell's own funds, the university was established. And it was established as a place where, from the beginning, agriculture was taught. From the beginning, faculty did lecture to farmers, to outside people.
It's best to understand Cornell Cooperative Extension as an expression of the land grant mission. Cornell University is New York State's land grant university. The idea that these universities would not just educate the sons and daughters from the farms in America, but that they would also do work that was helpful for farmers, for rural communities, was what eventually led to the creation of the National Extension System in 1914.
Liberty Hyde Bailey, who was sort of the father of cooperative extension in New York State, because in 1896 he recognized that the state had a decided interest in the better education of its rural people, and he himself went all the way from Ithaca, way out into western New York, which is 200 miles away, and imagine the number of trains that one had to get on in order to get there, and perhaps a buggy ride at the other end, in order to hold meetings with farm people about, in that case, grape production. This is where it began, was this direct exchange. And then ultimately, after the Smith-Lever Act in 1914 and federal funding, Cornell could have an agent stationed in every county. So this is, in effect, the beginning of distance learning, but with an intermediary. And that intermediary between the university and the student, the farm people, were this team of county cooperative extension agents. Liberty Hyde Bailey wanted to start a women's unit of cooperative extension, and so lo and behold, he learned of a superintendent of schools. This was superintendent of rural schools, a very important position in 1900. And this was Martha Van Rensselaer, who had an executive position at that time, and an important one. One of her first bulletin, her very first bulletin, was called Saving Steps, pointing out the economic significance of being a housewife.
Now, it's a long story to getting from where extension in New York and nationally was in 1914 to getting to where it is today. We still see today an interest in the farm, an interest in agriculture. We still see today a strong interest in the home and in all the things that go into making a home and maintaining a home. We still see a very strong interest in community today.
That the legacy that White and Cornell established has a direct connection to what became cooperative extension.
Now you know the story of Cornell Cooperative Extension here in upstate New York. I'm Christine Shively for Unique New York.